All right, perfect. And I think my screen should be coming up now. Here it comes. And we'll kick things off. So welcome everyone. Thank you again for taking the time to attend our sixth Internet 2 Net Plus webinar session. I'll quickly introduce myself for those, since we might have some new attendees. I am Leighton Spencer. I am a Google Workspace specialist here at Google, specifically for higher education. And today we're going to be diving into the security features that come along with and are made available in fundamentals, and then enhancements that you can actually take advantage of within our standard and plus editions. We will also kind of be covering how security remains extremely important to all higher education institutions. And it's something that Google is ensuring is built into all of our products as well. So this session is going to shed some light on the most important enhancements that are available in our free and paid editions, and how you as admins can take the most advantage of those within your own environments. So our agenda today is going to be pretty packed. So we're going to be starting off with how security risks are ever growing in the education sector. We're then going to be covering what Google is doing to provide a proactive approach to these challenges. We'll then kind of hear from our solutions engineering team as they showcase and kind of demo a number of the security functionalities as well. So you can see where those are within your admin consoles. And then we'll kind of wrap up the same way we have been, with some helpful takeaway resources, and then Q&A if we have time towards the end. So security is becoming more and more important as threats change and become more complex. I'm sure you all know this, but security crimes are growing and are getting more costly. You may already kind of know all of these different features and functionalities, but calling it out, where we are seeing some big pieces are, there have been huge increases in the amount of malware that has been occurring year over year, as well as with ransomware. And then I think also what's truly remarkable is, over 75% of organizations, according to some studies, have experienced phishing attacks since 2020. So there's a good chance that, within the group that's in this meeting here today, that one of you have actually dealt with this, or many of you have actually dealt with this. So it's not great math when we're actually looking at security and how important and risky it is when you don't have a full plan kind of built out. I think more importantly as well, cyber threats to education institutions are at an all-time high as well. So cyber attacks have increased exponentially, even more in 2020 when a number of learners moved to that digital classroom versus it being kind of in-person learning. But digital learning will always kind of be a big part of education moving forward. So that's where we actually want to make sure that you all are set up for success and are able to make sure that you have your environments set up within Google, so this is less of a risk for you all. I think some other pieces that kind of have added to this rapid rise are that ed techs have kind of become more and more, complex as well, with a variety of options that you all are utilizing, a number of different functionalities that come with all of these ed tech solutions, and how they vary with kind of their dynamics of digital learning, as well as how much more complex the cyber threats are getting when they're actually tapping into these. So something that, just to highlight all of this, security is obviously one of Workspace's core values, and something that we know is really important to our customers. And we want to just expose and kind of let it known as well that these threats are real, and it's ones that we're actually trying to address on a day-to-day basis for you all as well. So I think what we hear about when it comes to external threats is obviously malicious actors who are attempting to get and gain entry into your domains and into your workspace environments. But another piece of this as well that comes up frequently is internal kind of vulnerabilities. So data shows that internal vulnerabilities are there as well. And though many of these are accidental in nature, with some incidents being caused by human error or sharing something that shouldn't be shared externally, these are all things that we'll be actually getting into as well on how you can actually prevent leaks from happening at all, or preventing or taking action once they do occur, how you can actually recall a lot of that information. So I think all of these things are really, really important pieces that we're going to be kind of diving into today. And I think that that's one of the big pieces that we just wanted to kind of set the foundation with. And then I think this is just a number of other pieces here, kind of double tapping into this. And we know that you all are probably well aware of the threat at hand. But again, in 2020, the FBI had also published a warning to EDU customers and EDU kind of institutions as a whole that cyber actors were actively targeting K-12 and higher education institutions with the goal of kind of pushing ransomware events and phishing attacks. In one of these events, one attacker actually demanded up to $40 million from a K-12 district. So the cost of that, recovering that data from that ransomware attack can completely cripple a school and completely change the dynamic of what you actually feel and are able to accomplish with getting that data back as well. So this is when, Google, obviously, we've always been thinking about security in a framework of protecting all of our customers and clients. But this is when I realized that, how important Google and the work that we do can obviously help you all in making sure that you never have to live through something like that as well. And then we're just going to briefly run through some of these pieces, but not only are these attacks attributed to the safety of your organizational data and kind of putting that at risk, but as I explained kind of just a second ago, they're also very expensive. So, the three main kind of financial implications of ransomware are those payout costs, which increase hugely year over year as attacks become more sophisticated, and kind of regaining that data is becoming more difficult. Recovery costs. So even when universities don't pay a ransom, the cost of remediation and recovering that data and the operations that are required are not always budgeted for. So that's, another line item that wasn't necessarily accounted for at the beginning of the year when finance was kind of crunching their numbers. And then cyber insurance costs as well. So universities are being impacted by an increase in premium costs and deductibles. And we've seen, up to 300% year over year growth within cyber insurance pieces as well. So I think with all that being said, we want to make sure that you all are aware of all the features that Google has that you can take advantage of. And in order to kind of set the best strategy possible and put it in place for your organization so you can proactively prevent these types of things from occurring. So we're going to help kind of make sure that you're able to secure your users and have a safe teaching and learning environment that can happen with ease. And you're no longer having to look over your shoulder as often to make sure that cybersecurity and cyber attacks aren't necessarily something where you're going to be vulnerable. So I think with all that, we're going to dive into how Google is approaching these threats and the things that we are focusing on in order to protect the workspace environment, but then all users that utilize Google tools as well. So what we want to do and what we want you to know is, every day with Google is a day where you're a little bit safer. So as you can see from these stats, we're doing a number of things, specifically in the workspace environment, but then also for all users that utilize Google tools and trying to keep them safe across, the entire internet. So Google for Education is built on the same global cloud infrastructure, bolstered by multiple layers of security at its core that continually protects billions of our individual users daily, but then also obviously, the hundreds of millions of users that also utilize Google Workspace for Education. Some other items to be aware of too is, and I think this really speaks to how Google is building and planning our infrastructure here internally as well, is there's never been a reported ransomware attack ever on a Chrome OS device. I call that out because that is actually kind of the root of where Google is kind of leading with security, with everything being online, everything being stored and kind of duplicated across a wide network of data centers. It provides you with a very scalable and easy way to recover what you need if there ever is an event, but then also protect that with encryptions and things along those lines too. This also speaks to kind of how we're working to prevent this, I guess, at that granular level as well. So from an individual user up to, the entire infrastructure and network. And then I think here is where you can actually see where the different, security access levels go across the different editions that we have within Google Workspace for Education. So you saw on the previous slide everything that we're doing for individual users and customers as a whole. But as we go through today's session, we're going to help you take a more proactive approach on the features that we're going to be highlighting within Workspace for Education, Fundamentals, Workspace for Education Standard, and Workspace for Education Plus. These are additions that we highlighted in our first webinar session with the different pricing and availability through Internet 2. But I did want to also let you know that those recordings will be actually posted here fairly shortly. But this is going to be something where we're going to be diving into the security functionalities of these editions as well today. So available within that, fundamentals tier or at no charge security highlights that we will be covering are how we provide an ad-free environment and know that your data is automatically being encrypted in transit and at rest. You can rely on the rigorous data protections and compliance practices that include third-party audits. You can have access to two-factor authentication sign-in or single sign-ons and password management. As well, there's the Alert Center to notify you of potential security threats, automated data loss protection to protect against loss or theft in Drive and Gmail, data retention, search, and exporting within Vault, and then enhancements to email integrity and confidentiality with secure multi-purpose internet mail extensions. So that's all included in our fundamentals tier. So that's just right off the bat, you get access and have the ability to actually turn on and utilize all of those features and functionalities within Workspace for Education Fundamentals, our no cost tier. Where we add on some additional enhancements and functionalities are with Education Standard and Education Plus offerings for privacy and security highlights. So that's where you'll actually be able to prevent, detect, and remediate threats within the Security Center, which includes our security dashboards, our security health page, and our investigation tool. You'll also be automatically able to scan emails for threats within the security sandbox, essentially manage your devices with advanced mobile device management, define data regions to limit or distribute data where it is required to continental US or Europe, or both of those, or our global network, enable advanced permission settings, ensure safer file sharing with advanced Drive security controls, move user and log data with Google Workspace migration, automatically manage groups with dynamic groups, gain more insights with Gmail logs and classroom logs within BigQuery, and then track usage across your domain with audit logs for Drive, devices, LDAPs, and more. So all of that is covered within our Standard and Plus editions, but pieces that you can add on to truly protect your end users and then your overarching environment as well. But I think another piece is, we also understand that you also need to look at and potentially see third-party studies and things that were conducted as well. So this is where the Forrester Consulting conducted a commission study on the return of investment of Education Plus for both K-12 and higher education institutions. You can actually read the full report, and we can actually make sure that's shared on the registration page as well. So you can actually read along in the full report right here from this deck. But I will be highlighting some additional pieces there. So from the study, some additional benefits of Plus for your organization is that there is a 95% reduction in the number of phishing attempts experienced by utilizing Education Plus. Another piece is there was a 98% reduction in IT labor needed to resolve a specific phishing incident. So this just means that you can actually spend your valuable time on other things than having to, make sure that you're managing and looking up all of the different moving pieces through digging through logs and things like that in order to find out exactly what occurred and then how you can prevent that in the future. Plus, simplifies all of that and gives you that time back so you can actually spend it on other things. From this study as well, there's a pretty staggering kind of stat where over a 3-year period of time, it actually saved around $73,000 worth of time for IT teams not having to focus on finding and deleting phishing emails. So not only is Plus providing you with more security within the platform, but is also giving you time and potentially money without having to focus on some basic items that can be accomplished with a click of a button. So up next, our solutions engineering team will be demonstrating how you can actually use some of these premium security features to get the most out of your investment and to protect your environments, as well as diving into some of those fundamentals tier features on how you can kind of set those up for success as well. So I believe Jeff's going to be taking it over from me, so I'll kick it over to him, and yeah, he can take it away.
Thanks so much, Leighton. Leighton, I might have you continue on the deck if that's okay, and then I'll take over the screen. Awesome. Hello, everyone. Good to be with you all. My name is Jeff Kurtz. I'm a solutions engineer on Workspace for Education. We're going to take the next few minutes and talk a little bit about security within Workspace for Education, and specifically some of the key features, some of the very critical features that we want to make sure that you're aware of and know how to access and use effectively. So Leighton, if you go to the next slide. Leighton talked about some of the really awful, heartbreaking headlines that we've seen around the globe. We want to make sure that none of you experience that. And so in this case, we're going to kind of frame this discussion around our made-up university and their made-up, but actually very real problems, things that folks around the world do encounter, and we want to make sure that you can avoid. If you go to the next slide, we're going to start with this headline. All too common, unfortunately, made-up university hit with a ransomware attack causing widespread outages. We've seen this. It's really awful when this happens. We do everything we can to try to support schools going through this. The great news is that Workspace has a lot of tools to prevent this. And as far as ransomware goes, it's very hard, if not impossible, to hold Workspace for ransom. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So we're going to flip this headline on its head. And if we go to the next slide, this is what we like to see. Made Up City University prevented a ransomware attack, avoiding widespread outages. And we're going to do this with a few tools. If you go to the next slide, we're going to talk about these 5-6 tools briefly. I'm going to quickly do a demo of some of these so just so you can see them in action if you haven't already. Some of you probably are very, very familiar with all of these. So it'll be a bit of a review. First things first, I know you all know about two-step verification. You're all using it in some shape or form in your lives. Hopefully you are all using it at your institution. I know a lot of you are using other products as your IDP, or you've got third-party two-factor products. That's great. Whatever works for you, we're happy. Workspace does integrate with a lot of third-party two-factor products, and so anything that makes sense for you is great. I just want to show you, in case you are interested in using two-factor within Workspace and the Workspace functionality that exists. I'll just show you this real quick. As I take over the screen. Okay, here we go. So of course, you all know this is the Workspace admin console. And within it, we have our two-factor settings. So these can be found under security, then authentication, and then two-factor verification. Two-factor can be allowed by clicking this checkbox. You can do this on a organization basis or an OU basis or even a group basis. So you get a lot of flexibility there. Besides allowing users to turn on two-step, of course, you can also enforce two-step. And so if you do this, you can set an enrollment period, so you give times to enroll in two-step before they get locked out of their account. You can allow users to trust their devices, and then you can specify the methods. They could be any methods. You could say any methods except for codes via text or phone calls, because we know, well, that's still better than nothing. They are less secure than other methods. Or you could, of course, enforce only security keys for a particular population. And you get a few more features along with that. What we would say just most generally here is hopefully all of you are able to allow your users to turn on two-step, as it's a really critical and important feature. We want to very strongly recommend that you've got two-step on for your admin accounts, especially your super admin accounts, and that you're enforcing that across the university. Obviously, with the keys to the castle, it's really important that you've got all methods in place to prevent anyone from getting in. So that is two-step for you. Very quickly, we're going to take a look at the Alert Center. All of these features, by the way, are available in fundamentals. The Alert Center is a very, very powerful tool. Hopefully, all of you are using it today. When I come to the Alert Center, I have a whole bunch of alerts here. And I'm going to show you kind of what this looks like when you're setting up alerts. So there are quite a number of different types of alerts that Workspace allows. We have, first of all, starting off with system-defined rules. So we can see what that looks like here. For example, you may want to know when a leaked password has been detected. You may want to know when there's a government-backed attack that might be happening. You may want to know certain things around suspicious logins, right? Or phishing-based activities. There's a lot in here that are possible, and you can customize these alerts and how they come to you, and the frequency and severity and things like that. But you can also create your own rules. Ken is going to talk a little bit about these trust rules that are here and data protection rules, both really cool features. You can set up activity rules. I'll talk about that when I talk about the investigation tool. So you can monitor activity that's happening across your organization, and you can set up rules to automate certain activities. And you can also set up device management rules. You can actually set up rules related to Chrome actions, such as copying and pasting data. And you can set up reporting rules as well, so you can be alerted when something happens within the audit logs. Some of these alerts are available within fundamentals, and some are available within our Plus and Standard editions. But the great thing about this is it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can decide you want the alerts sent to certain inboxes. You want to set up a certain frequency or severity scale, so you can kind of play with things, so you're balancing false positives and false negatives. But this is a really great thing to set up to your liking, to make sure that you're getting alerted when certain things happen, so that you can get on it right away. The next feature I want to talk about, this feature is only available in EDU Standard and Plus, is Security Sandbox. It lives within Gmail settings within the admin console, and it's one very small feature. And you may say, why are we highlighting it? And we're highlighting it because it specifically targets malware, ransomware, and especially zero-day threats. So as you know, Gmail has an incredible scale, billions of users across consumer, education, and enterprise. There's a lot that's happening in the background. In every edition of Workspace for Education, we are scanning constantly to look for things like phishing and malware, to look for suspicious attachments, to stop bad actors from getting through to your users. And we detect 99.9% of the spam and the phishing emails that come through. However, we all know that there are bad actors out there that are creating new problems every single day, right? And this feels like a game of whack-a-mole. But the great thing about this feature is that what it'll do is it'll essentially, before delivering an email to your user's inbox with an attachment, it's going to execute that attachment in a virtual sandbox. It's going to make sure that nothing blows up. If there is some type of malware or ransomware, even if it was created this morning, it's going to detect that. And then you as the admin get to say, well, I don't want to send that through to my users, or I want to put this into a quarantine, or I want to delete it right away. So you get to decide what you want to do based on the results of this scan. If you have Standard and Plus, please consider enabling this. You can do this in a test environment. You can do this just for a particular OU, for example, and you can see how it works before you enable it. It does add a slight bit of latency, but given the trade-off here in terms of what it can detect, it's a really important feature. Next, I want to talk about very briefly context-aware access. So context-aware access helps you define policies to essentially allow or deny access to Workspace based on the context of the user's request. So, for example, we all know that within a Workspace fundamentals, for example, you can turn on and off services, right? So if you don't want to give access for certain folks to Gmail, of course, you can turn that off for those particular folks. What context-aware access does is it kind of takes that to the next level and allows you to define granular access policies based on where your users are and what devices they're using. So let me just give you a few examples. And this, by the way, is available only in Standard and Plus. The first thing that I do is I define access levels. And there's a lot that we can do here. We can kind of use basic, or we can use more advanced modes. But if I use the basic mode, it's going to allow me to define conditions. So for example, I can define a policy to only allow users to access my Workspace apps or particular Workspace apps when they're in a certain place. So I can say geographic origin equals, and I could pick a whole bunch of countries. I could also exclude a bunch of countries. I can also define policies based on an IP subnet, right? So if you want to restrict certain access to folks within a particular building, right, or on campus, or even off campus, you can do that here. You can also do this based on device policies. You can do this based on the OS that the user is using. So you might want to restrict a certain OS, maybe be a bit more lenient with another OS. You can also define policies based on other access levels. So you can kind of nest these things. You can also use common expression language to define your own policies. So there's a lot that you can do here with these policies. And then once you define the access levels, you can then apply them to apps and to users. So you can say, I want to take these particular users. You can define individual users. You could say, I want to take these groups, or I want to take these OUs, and I want to apply a certain policy to particular apps. So for example, you can apply these policies to our first-party apps, Gmail, Drive, Chat, etc. You can also apply these policies to third-party apps that you are using via SAML, right? So if you've got a Google Workspace set up to SSO into third-party apps, you could set up policies based on that. You can also set up context-aware access policies for the admin console itself. Obviously, you want to be very careful here, but what's great about this is, you might say, look, I only want folks accessing the admin console when they're on an approved device, or when they're on the latest version of an OS that I know is stable, or when they're in certain regions of the world. So it gives you additional security layers here to ensure that bad actors are not accessing your organization and its data. There are a number of features that are going to be coming to context-aware access. One, it's a user request, which is monitor mode. So you'll essentially get the ability to kind of simulate this, turn on a policy in simulation mode, essentially, and see who would be allowed and who would be blocked. So you can essentially see what's going to happen before you actually set out these policies, because obviously they're very powerful. They can block folks from accessing certain apps, right? So monitor mode, I think, will be very useful. Real quick, the last two tools I want to show, we could spend an entire session just on these tools. Again, these are available in Standard and Plus. The first is the dashboard. This is like mission control across your domain. So it's going to give you a whole bunch of charts and graphs showing you what's happening in various areas, such as Gmail, Drive sharing, OAuth grants, suspicious activities, device activities, DLP, etc. And I can customize this. I can actually create my own cards to place on here, which is really fantastic. I just rearranged some of the system defined cards. All of these that you're seeing here were defined by the system. They come right out of the box. So for example, when we're concerned about things like phishing and ransomware, I pulled up the phishing card here first. I've got the malware card here. Luckily, we're not seeing any malware come through, but I do have some suspicious attachments. Say that 5 times fast. I've got user reports up here as well. I've got my spoofing reports. And then I've got some suspicious login attempts as well as failed login attempts. So these are something that I want to keep an eye on. And then file sharing here. So I've got kind of my top areas of concern. And then if I want to look into any of these reports, I can click here for viewing the report itself. And I can kind of dig in from here. So I can use these filters up at the top. I can click on any of these particular data points to see what's happening on a particular day. I can then see the emails that are coming through that were marked as phishing. I can see the subject line. And then I have all of this metadata available to me right here in the dashboard. But it doesn't stop there. I can dig into this data even further. And we can go into one of our most important tools, which is the investigation tool, directly from here. So for example, let's say I want to dig into these emails a little bit more. I want to understand what's happening, and I might want to take action on some of these. I can click this investigation magnifying glass icon. And what it's going to do is it's going to open up the investigation tool in a brand new tab, and it's going to have populated the search for. So in this case, it's picked Gmail log events. And it's selected these AND conditions here. I've got a certain date range, I've got an event equals receive, and I've got my spam classification as phishing. It brings up all of these emails here in the bottom that meet the criteria that we asked for. And then I can do a bunch of things from here. I can actually click here to see a bunch of the details. I can see the original details, the routing steps, the header information. I can also click to view the message itself. You can turn on and off this feature, but we have this turned on, which is asking for a justification. Anything that you do here in the investigation tool, just like the rest of the admin console, is logged in the admin audit log. And so any reason that I put in here is also going to be logged. So we make sure we have an audit trail of who's accessing emails. Once I do that, I can actually see the email and decide if I want to take action. If I do, I have a bunch of actions here down at the bottom that I can take. I can also take these actions in bulk. So I can select emails individually, I can select multiple, I can select all of them, and then I have this actions toolbar. And this is going to allow me to take these actions such as deleting emails, I can mark them as phishing or spam, I can restore, send to the inbox, or send to the quarantine. So very, very powerful tool. Depending on your data source, there are lots of things you can do. You can, for example, change drive file links, sharing, things like that. You can kill meetings. You can suspend and restore users, etc. This tool allows for looking across all of the data sources that we have available. So for example, I want to look at my OAuth logs. I might want to look at my drive logs, my chat logs. All of that's here. You get a whole bunch of conditions specific to those logs. So all of the metadata that we have available, you're able to look into. You can even look into user events. So for example, was there a link click in a particular email? If I'm concerned about phishing, I might want to look into that. And then from here, I could pivot my search into, I can pivot my search into something else. So for example, if all of these folks received phishing emails, maybe they clicked on a link, I now want to look at other events. I might want to look at their drive files to make sure that permissions weren't changed. I maybe want to look at their user log to make sure that they have two-factor turned on, or for example, to make sure that there weren't any suspicious or failed login attempts. You can save all these investigations, you can share them with other admins, and you can create rules to automate these investigations and even automate the actions. When I talked about activity rules earlier, those activity rules are based on these investigations. And so I can set them up to run every hour, every 24 hours, and have it take action on my behalf if I so choose. That was a lot thrown at you, but we just wanted to highlight some of the critical features, especially when dealing with things like phishing and ransomware. And with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Ken, who's going to take us through the next section.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Hello, everybody. I am Ken Matthews. You all know me, Solutions Engineer on the Workspace for Education team. And we're going to go through the next, I don't know, Leighton, if you can highlight your presentation, because I just want to run through that that next headline that's going to be specific to sharing. Can everybody see that presentation? Yes. Okay. So here's the next headline that you hope to not see come across your desks or have your CIOs ping you late hour.
I am not seeing your presentation yet.
Okay. Sorry. I can also share too if it's better, Leighton. Let me present my one. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Leighton. Made Up University confirms student social security numbers mistakenly shared, impacting thousands. Hopefully we do not want to see that. We would rather see the next headline, which would be Made Up University quickly updates their sharing permissions on student social security numbers that were mistakenly shared so that they can protect thousands of students within their organization. And I will jump into what you can use in terms of the security features on the next slide that will help you work with that. And as we all know, the first one is going to be data loss prevention. This is available to all of our editions. So you don't need Plus or Standard to be able to leverage this. There are some premium features that I'll highlight using DLP. But in general, you can leverage these DLP rules across your environment, whether you have Plus, Standard, or Fundamentals. Target audiences and trust rules, these are going to start to dig into actually how your files are shared within your environment, and these are premium features. So this is only available for Standard and Plus. Target audiences are going to be specific to how links are shared within your environment. You as an admin can decide, do I want to remove the option to surface all of the information to my users that allows them to share to the entire university? And do I just want to scope it down to their particular OU? Or do I want to say only students can share with students and faculty, or faculty can share with students and other faculty members? Or if I have a very restrictive department within the organization or university, do I want to make sure that they're only sharing within that department? And maybe there are some elevated users within the department that can share with other departments. And then, of course, if there is an unfortunate event in your environments, you can leverage Vault. I would also call out that something that isn't necessarily talked about in this particular slide is the investigation tool is very handy in terms of logging data, and extending your BigQuery logs is your logs with BigQuery integrations actually is a security feature in many ways. The log data itself is going to be near real time for most of that data, but you can extend those logs into a year to 2 years if you wanted to. So if you had somebody come at you with what happened on said date that is beyond that 6 months, you would have the ability to pull those logs using that. With that, I'm going to dive into this demonstration so you can see what it looks like in real time, starting obviously with, and I think I'm probably going to have to log in. Speaking of security, let's just do a quick refresh. Yep, I'm going to have to log in. As my session has timed out because I am an admin, and that is a good thing. So once I logged in, we're going to start. Where we're going to start is essentially under the security section here in the admin console. I've highlighted the overview, and we're going to start with the DLP rules, which is going to be under data protection. You can also go under access and data control. You can see it here under data protection. And this is essentially where you're going to set up your DLP rules and your detectors that you could leverage within your DLP rules. Also, fun note, it's available for chat if you're a Plus or Standard user. So that is, you can start creating chat-specific rules to ensure that any items or conversations with external users is not exposing data in your environment. Here I have a few detectors. I'm not going to go through them other than to say I created content compliance rule using DLP to leverage against emails that are coming in that may be trying to get my users to buy gift cards, which we know happens a lot within university environments and K-12 environments. So this is something that I could potentially set up. I also have, if I was a K-12 school, I can create a bad words list and use that in the DLP rule to ensure my students are not cursing or bullying each other within their environments if I wanted to. But in this particular instance, I have a few rules. They're very simply, you go in here, you add your rule, you can create your rule from scratch, or you can create a rule from templates. We have a lot of valuable templates that you can use off the bat. You're going to want to manage your thresholds, and you're going to want to manage your severity levels to ensure that these are getting caught within the logging data. But you could very simply scope these out to an OU or a group quickly using these. And then as your environment, things happen within your environment, you can create your own here. Just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'll go into the PII one. Here I have one that's related to a particular OU. We're going to call it HIPAA. It could be research data. It could be anything you want in your organization and administration. And essentially what this is saying is that if users are going to send messages or upload files, and incidentally, I could choose to restrict file upload. That is a setting within chat. So I don't necessarily have to check this if I have that turned off. It could be either file upload or image only. There are some three settings that you can have with that. But if I was uploading files, I can choose to have this scanned by DLP, and I can also choose to turn on OCR recognition, which you'll see play out in the demonstration. And I can also make sure that all my drive files, in terms of if they're created, modified, updated, or shared, that DLP is running against those particular actions. Once I'm ready to go, you see all these predefined conditions. You can set your threshold levels, you can set your minimum match count and unique matches to ensure that you're meeting the standards that you need. And then you're ready to go. Hit save, hit continue. You can essentially go over it, make sure everything looks good, send it to the alert center. That's probably where you're going to spend, as Jeff mentioned, that's probably where you're going to spend the initial investigation. Right at the alert center, you got it in an email, you jump into the alert center, you investigate directly from there. You can jump into the investigation tool from there, and you can email all of your super admins with this rule. That's essentially DLP in a nutshell. We're going to see it play out in a minute, but I want to go over the targeted audiences, the drive trust rules on the admin side, and then we'll see how that plays out with users. For trust rules, that's going to be under directory, and it's essentially like a group, but not a group. But here you have targeted audiences right here. Sorry, for targeted audiences first, trust rules next. There are 3 steps to this. You're going to create your target audience, you're going to add your members, and then you're going to scope it to either Drive or chat. Those are the 2 available options. For Drive, you can actually scope it to an OU or a group. For chat, it is the entire domain at this time. Here I have a HIPAA compliant group that is going to be for HIPAA compliant data. And I'm going to add some members here. Now, something cool, just to call out here, I'm not going to show you how to set it up, but this is a dynamic group. And with dynamic groups, you can actually scope that to an OU. So I know I have an OU of HIPAA compliant people that need to be compliant with HIPAA. And I essentially create a common expression language query that tells me that everybody who's in this OU should be a member of this group. And then I can add that dynamic group if I check the security option when I'm creating the dynamic group. I can add that dynamic group to this target audiences, and it will automatically be updated from now until for whatever. So as users pop in and out of that OU, this group will be updated, and these policies will apply to the users in that group. Once that is set, you want to go into your apps and Drive and Docs. We'll show Drive and Docs only here, and it's going to be under sharing settings, and you're going to see target audiences. Here I've already created some target audiences for the entire organization for faculty and staff. I don't want my users to share with the entire university, but they can share with the other faculty members and other staff members based on their OUs. I've created other dynamic groups based on that as well. But if I want to go down into this particular restrictive area, which is this HIPAA OU, you see I'm only allowing my users to share within that organizational unit. I do have some users, though, within that organizational unit who need to share with other members in the university. So I've created this group here that allows them to share not only with that HIPAA OU, but also with members of the administration staff. I could add in faculty if I wanted to here, if that's what my policy would allow. And you're going to see how this plays out when they look in, when that particular user is looking at the sharing settings. So now I have my targeted audiences set up, and now I want to dig into the trust rules, and they will be off unless you turn them on. When you turn them on, the sharing settings that you're used to, that we've known for years and years and years, will go away. They'll be created into default trust rules, and then you can view those trust rules moving forward, as you see here. And here's a number of trust rules. Just let me scope this out, and I'm going to pop up this up a little bit more so you can see it a little bit better. These particular trust rules here are what I've created. Now, I have my defaults, which is essentially saying that all my users within my organization, these are the rules that are going to be created when you turn them on. All my users within my organization can share freely with everybody else. I'm not going to have a warning. None of that is going to happen. And then I have the one where it says all my users within my organization who want to share outside of the organization, they're going to get a warning that says, hey, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want, and we want that, right? But because I want to get more granular, because I have certain subsections or OUs and groups within my environment that have different needs, I'm going to make those inactive, and then I'm going to create all of these. Now, you may want to create these active first before you, and make sure and test those before you make these inactive, so you don't inadvertently affect people, or do it in a test domain prior. But how this essentially plays out is the first one here, as I have internal university-wide sharing, sending and receiving. You have 4 options within a trust rule. You have the scope, which is essentially your university or your user or your OU that you want to scope it to, that you have as an admin control over. The trigger, which is either going to be sharing or receiving. The condition is going to be based on the trigger. So if I'm sharing it, it's going to be based on who's receiving the file. If I'm receiving, then it's going to be based on the person who is sharing the file. So that comes into play if the scope is related to users within your environment. Obviously, not so much, because you don't have control over anybody in the outside world. And then, of course, you have the action. Do I want to allow it? Do I want to allow it with a warning? Or do I want to block it altogether? So essentially what this is saying is everybody in my entire organization, except for this HIPAA OU and this group of elevated users, can share and receive with everybody else in my organization. I'm going to allow that. That is totally okay, and that's fine. The next one we have here is it's going to be related to external. So same thing, everybody in my organization, except for these particular subsections of my departments, can share and receive with anybody else in the world, but we're going to have them get a warning that says, hey, are you sure you don't want to do that? That's essentially mirroring the default rules. So I've mirrored those, but now I want to get granular, and I have this medical school or research department who should only be able to share internal to the university. So here we go. I have the OU of HIPAA people, the people within that OU. They can share and receive, but they can only share and receive with each other. And I'm going to allow that, no warnings, no blocking. But I do have an elevated group of users within there who I trust, who can request more access to be able to share with other members of the university. I've created this rule to trigger on sharing and receiving, and they can share with other administration staff, and they can also share with my IT admins. They could also, if I chose to, share with the faculty members if I wanted to. But I'm going to warn those users because they do have access to sensitive data. So I want to make sure I trust them, but I want to make sure that they at least see the warning to say, hey, you sure you want to do this? Is this something that you should be sharing broadly? Next, we have here external sharing. And essentially what this is saying is this is allowing all of these elevated members. So the people who are in the HIPAA compliant group, they actually cannot receive anything from the outside world. But the elevated members who are can receive from the outside world. And that's what this is saying, that I'm going to allow those users to receive from users external. Now, that's incredibly restrictive, but it's just something to show as a point. You don't have to necessarily do this. How that plays out, we have here that my IT admin has access to a file of fake student data with social security numbers. And this is what, they don't have any drive trust rules or that are applied to this particular, the OU that they're in or the group that they're in, but they do have access to this data. And this is where the DLP rule will come into effect. So you can see very quickly that this document is telling me at the top here that there's a warning saying, you know, this document has sharing sensitive information. So be sure you know what you want to do when you share it. And when I click share, I can actually see that I have an external user that has access to this already prior to setting up the DLP rule. But once I set it up, that user is no longer allowed to access that file. Similarly, if I want to go in and send this to a user who's external, like a Gmail account, I'm going to get a warning that says, nope, can't do that because the university will not let you do that. You'll also get a trigger in the alert center because you as an admin set that up. So you can investigate that and maybe talk to that user to let them know, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. What's going on? What's the use case here, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what's interesting to note is this is also shared with other users, and these users within the organization. For instance, Mark, he's a member of that HIPAA OU, but he has view access here. So if I go over to Mark's view over here, let's just make sure I'm logged in as Mark. Yep. I know that if I try to share this item, I have to request from Ken, hey, can you let me share this item? I want to share this item. And Ken's going to say, no, you can't share this item. Now, if Mark's account was compromised, then I was like, okay, I see I can't share that, but I do want to send this to my external account via chat. Here's my external account, and I'm going to pop that in there. But because I have DLP for chat, I'm unable to do that as well. So I can dismiss that message, but it's not going to do anything. It's just going to sit there in my view, but nobody else can see it in the world. And then I can delete that if I want to. So that's protecting the ability on multiple levels to be able to send that information externally. You'll also see in this particular instance that they're working on a very sensitive project in that HIPAA OU or the research OU. It's called Project Icarus. I actually do have a DLP rule that is going to look for the name Icarus, and it's going to automatically, based on edits that are performed on these documents, if that document has Icarus, it's going to automatically use labels to label it as confidential, which I can then use as a condition in my DLP rules if I want to. Also, I just want to point out that there was a cool item that was released yesterday around automatic classification. So you could set automatic classification for, say, the HIPAA OU to classify any documents created in that OU moving forward to have whatever item you need or whatever label you need. It's also important to note that if you change ownership, that will also trigger that particular rule for auto classification. So there's some storage implications there. I'll let you play that out and we can talk about it at a later time. But just wanted to mention that. In this particular instance, we have sharing here. This user is in the HIPAA OU, but they're a part of that elevated group. They're going to want to share with Norma. Norma is part of that HIPAA OU. That's okay. I can share that. All gravy. Everything is good there. Now, if I wanted to go in and I wanted to say, hey, you know what? I want to share with a particular student or an alumni. I'm going to go ahead and share that, and it's going to say, nope, you can't do that because you're not allowed to share with any students within your organization. I can do the same thing, and I say, well, okay, let me share it with a Gmail account or an external account. And it's going to say, nope, you can't do that because you're not able to do that because of the Drive Trust rule. But fine, let me share it with Ken. He's the IT admin of my department. He can see this actual information. I'm going to go ahead and share that. But I get a warning that says, hey, you know, this user is outside your particular department. Are you sure you want to do that? And in this instance, I do, so I'm going to share it anyway, and I'm going to move forward. So you begin to see how you can begin to create boundaries within your organization to protect data. Another important feature to call out is that target audiences that we talked about. And here you see that I don't see the entire university. I just see HIPAA and I just see administration. So in terms of link sharing, I as a user don't have the ability to share beyond those boundaries that the administrator has created. Really good in terms of giving you control and securing the data within your environment. Also potentially securing the data and how it's shared within your environment to make it easier for your lives moving forward. And then lastly, we all know Vault, but Vault is where you're going to go if there is an unfortunate incident and you need to essentially run some e-discovery commands and tools to be able to pull that information because you have your leadership asking you some information. I would also mention that you could pull the log data from BigQuery or the investigation tool if it's within a 6-month window. We know about the standard retention times. We know about the custom retention rules that you can set that would take precedent there. But if you wanted to actually do a search or an investigation based on social security numbers being shared inadvertently in your environment, you can create a matter. And once you have that matter here, you're going to be able to choose which service. I've actually already saved a query here based on this, so we'll put that in here. So I'm looking at Drive data because I know that it is going to be specific to Drive data. That particular document was shared, and then it was copied, and then it was deleted. I see that in the logs. In this particular instance, I'm going to scope it. I can scope it to specific accounts if I knew who was doing that, a compromised account, the organizational unit, share drives or sites. In this case, I'm going to just scope it here to the organizational unit. You can definitely get more granular in terms of your search terms, search operators here. I'm just simply using SSN here because I know it's part of that document. I do search and I'm going to surface those documents and I'm going to see those documents. I can click on those documents and I can quickly see that, you know, a state of that document. It's something that I can download. It's a preview of that document. And I can download that information if I need to. It no longer exists in the user account, but it does exist in Vault. So this just protects me going forward. And with that, let's dump out of here and we'll go back into the presentation, and we'll look at the next area up for just pull that up, slideshow, and there's a number of resources that we're going to share. I do not know why that's looking like that way. I do apologize. Look better if I did that. May have to on my windows. Hey, Leighton, do you mind if you share?
Yep, I can.
Thank you. All my windows make it look a little odd, so it's probably a little smaller than it needs to be. But essentially, we have a number of resources available in that deck, which will be shared with all of you. It's going to walk through all of the various settings, help center articles. We also have a really cool admin page that Jeff can talk a little bit more about. He was behind this resource landing page. He was behind the creation of this, worked with some of our partners to create this page so that you can walk through some use cases on how to use these tools, security use cases and how to use these tools. And then there's some additional resources here. We have a guide around mitigating ransomware in terms of Google Workspace documents. In some instances, adding Chrome or Chrome OS to your environment is going to make that even more secure. So that's something to think about maybe in a future iteration. We do have some great resources. Jeff led last summer a great customer training series around all of these products and a number of other products, premium features. And we have some interactive demos. You can go to that site there. And then, of course, we had a great YouTube series that came out called Hacking Google, just to give you a sense of how I think, and I know I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but how awesome our security team is here at Google and what they do, and kind of a behind the curtains view of what that security team is doing. And with that, I think we're at the end of our presentation. I want to thank you. I know we don't have much time here for Q&A, but let's see if we can't spin through the questions that have come up.
Yeah, and then quickly, just for the next 2 sessions that we have are also going to be customer-led and Internet 2-led sessions, covering communication and web presence, and then the other one will be data migration. So those are happening next week, Tuesday and Thursday, April 18th and 20th. And then our last couple Google sessions will be the following week, kind of kicking off with April 25th, and that's going to be the end user functionalities and tools that come with Plus. But yeah, let's dive into the questions. I can read them quickly. I'm going to go from the ones that got the most votes. So I think starting with the anonymous, are we going to be posting the recordings from the first session? Great call out. Our YouTube team's